Dr. Leslie Dobson, Inside the Mind of a Sexual Predator. Speaker, forensic, clinical psychologist, and author of The Friend Cleanse. My esteemed guest, Dr. Leslie Dobson, a seasoned clinical and forensic psychologist, joined me to unravel the complex tapestry of the criminal mind, particularly focusing on sexual predators. Before we dive into the details of our discussion, I'd like to mention Leslie's recent contribution to the literary world. Leslie has authored a compelling book titled The Friend Cleanse, which is an insightful exploration into the dynamics of personal relationships and the importance of surrounding oneself with positive influences. This book is a must-read for anyone looking to improve their social circle and enhance their overall well-being. So here's a sneak peek of what else we dived into. Understanding the predator's mindset. Leslie shed light on the chilling thought patterns of sexual predators, discussing the crucial differences between various types. We explore the dark corners of the minds driven by pedophilia and those with sadistic impulses. Self-protection strategies. We talked about the importance of being vigilant and the subtle tactics predators use. Leslie shared invaluable advice on how to stay alert and the role our clothing and body language play in deterring unwanted attention. The grooming process. Ever wondered how predators operate? Leslie broke down the grooming processes and the motivations behind these heinous acts, offering a deeper understanding of their behaviour. Inside the courtroom. The discussion took a turn into the legal world as Leslie recounted her experiences with criminals and victims in the justice system. We compared the behaviours of female and male criminals, revealing some surprising differences. Reading between the lines. We wrapped up with insights into body language and the intuitive skills women often use to gauge potential threats. It's all about empowering ourselves with knowledge to navigate the complexities of criminal behaviour without fear. And of course, Leslie's book, The Friend Cleanse. In addition to a deep dive into the criminal psyche, Dr. Dobson also introduced her latest book, The Friend Cleanse, which is an insightful exploration into the impact of interpersonal relationships on our mental health. The book provides a step-by-step guide on how to evaluate and detoxify our social circles, ensuring that we surround ourselves with positive and supportive individuals. It's a compelling read that complements our discussion on self-protection and personal well-being. This episode is a must-listen for anyone eager to learn more about the psychology of crime, the importance of healthy relationships, and how to protect oneself. Trust me, you'll come away with a new perspective and tools that could be life-changing. You can find Leslie at drlesliedobson.com. Link is in the show notes below. On Instagram, Dr. Leslie Dobson, again, links there. And on TikTok, where she is a real superstar. Link is below. And of course, her book, The Friend Cleanse, which is on Amazon, and click the link below. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownottodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, Dr. Leslie Dobson. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, what an interesting show this is going to be. I really like the mind side of it. You know, the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. We interview world record holders, some special forces guys, but the mind side, that's intriguing. I was interviewing the New Zealand All Blacks coach of 10 years, Steve Hansen, last week, and a lot of his stuff was psychology, even though it's about rugby. So your background is going to be intriguing. Criminal and forensic psychologist. Have I got that right?
Yes, and clinical. Clinical. So I still do therapy, but I work with the court system and I work a lot with criminals and, you know, the bad actors, but also the victims of the bad actors.
Wow, I was just interviewing a deputy sheriff from Arizona, from Pinal County actually last week. Nice guy. And we were saying
about bad guys. They don't play by the rules. But as cops, we also get to sort of interview everybody. Sometimes I'll interview the witness, sometimes I'll interview the victim, and sometimes I interview the bad guy. And gosh, the insights you get from that must be that are amazing for me. But as a psychologist, inside their minds just must be really tough, but also really insightful to deal with.
It really is. And I think what I'm struggling with the most right now as my Instagram grows, I want to spread the message of how the perpetrators think, how the inmates think, but I don't want to victim blame. And there is this fine line between, I'm not giving them an out, but I'm trying to explain to people that they don't have the same mind that you and I have, who aren't committing crimes over and over, who aren't raping, who aren't murdering. So I'm trying to figure out ways to explain the criminal mind, the thinking, how they only really care about consequences, and also the mental illness part of it.
It's tough, but you do very well. I mean, I do the how not to die guy stuff. I try not to put much violent stuff on there. I'll teach the soft side of things more. But just when I see a female speak about the same subject, and literally sometimes it'll be the same exact subject about locking the door and so on, the female seems to get it across a lot better. It's quite polarizing, I've seen, Lizzie, when we talk about this. And a lot of people want to put their head in the sand. But you had a post last week that really blew my mind, and a lot of them do, which is great. You do very well and your communication is good. But it was interesting what you're saying about the victims. And it made me think, the victim of a robbery, the robber picks that person because they are prey and a good target, right? They don't pick someone
Oh,
that's
yes.
strong and got lots of security. They pick the weak one and they go, right, I'm gonna get my thing. I'm gonna get my cash or wallet or whatever from the victim. But you were so right. A sexual predator would technically do the same thing, correct?
Yes, and I found it easier to lump sexual predators into two categories. We have the pedophilia, or the people who are after youth, and who may be immature emotionally themselves, and then we have the offenders who like to rape, who have the passion to harm people, who are sadistic, and they can't complete the rape unless they know the person is in pain.
Right.
And I
That's
think it's
right.
really important to differentiate those two types of minds when it comes to sexual predators.
Gosh, takes me back to the special forces days and some of the people I interviewed talking about seeing true evil in the world, and there is out there, and we don't want anybody to go through it. But then my question, pulling all this together, would be, in your decades of experience in that world, has there been a common thing among those sexual predators that they're looking for? And did they ever say, so there's two parts of the question, common theme, and have they ever said, if she just hadn't been like that, or if they'd just done that, I wouldn't approach them? Is there people that they wouldn't approach?
Yes. And partly it comes down to easy access to a victim. Uh, a lot of individuals have a fetish. They have a very specific type of person they like to approach, they like to harm. Uh, I've known individuals who only like to rape grandmothers who are well over 80 years old. And one in particular, his fantasy is that he's caring for her. He's giving her something that she wouldn't otherwise have. She wasn't dating, she was a widow.
Yeah.
So the delusions just start to build and build.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
what about the sort of ambush attacks I mean, that is definitely one side of things. And I've trained elderly people, which was great to empower those. But what about someone of your ilk out on the street? What would you have to do from the things these predators have told you that they wouldn't approach you if it wasn't really sort of that fetish thing? What's the best sort of things that you can do, the actions you can take to not be prey?
A lot of the time is they don't want you to be loud. They don't want to know that you, especially if it's a public setting, that you are going to scream. And this is somebody who's in the right state of mind and still choosing to rape.
Right.
So not a psychotic person who's, so they want an easy target. They want to grab you, they want to get the job done, and they want to go on their way without ever getting caught. So if you, or if I, as a woman walking around, am walking with a tall posture, if I have potential weapons in my hands, if I'm alert and aware and making eye contact, and if there's something about my presence where you know I will get loud, that can deter a lot of the more generalized rapists who are not serial rapists.
Great answer. Thank you. And that's brilliant from a psychologist, not from a self-defense side of things or policing side of things. That's literally from the mindset. And you've literally said the exact things everybody else says, which is excellent. That brings me to maybe the post you did last week and what you're saying there about not wanting to victim blame. Now it comes down to dress and how you are and where you are. And time, place, circumstance is a classic thing in the policing world. However, would you suggest that someone who is provocatively dressed, and hey, everybody can do their own thing. I say the first rule of self-defense is no rules. But if those people were dressed that way and they did what you said, would that lessen their likelihood to be prey and be a victim?
I think it would. So if you have an extremely strong woman walking in a bikini, yes, I think she would be less likely to be a victim to the more generalized rapists I've talked to. If you had a very meek woman walking alone at night in a bikini, I think she would be more victimized. So that's in a more general sense. But also, individuals rape because they want to orgasm. And it's important that we really talk through that. They also want easy, quick access to the orgasm. If you're not wearing a lot of clothes, and this has been used in trials before as case law, that clothing is a slight deterrent to rape because it's going to take longer to get them where they want to be.
That goes along the whole thing you said for the last 5 minutes. I was literally just saying it on a show this morning I was interviewed on. The bad guy doesn't want to get in trouble or doesn't want trouble. And that those are generic terms. You can use them anyway. You know, a pen in the a pen aerating a bad guy can be trouble, or screaming can get them in trouble. That sounds brilliant. It's just taking steps, having someone beside you, so not walking alone, being in public areas, and different choices of clothing, and possible weapons. You said possible weapons in your hands, improvised weapons. Those are all things that predator is looking at and discounting, or I call it the traffic light system. I call it the red, orange, green. And if they're just getting green, 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 then the momentum is building, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I was getting a coffee the other day with somebody, and I had my purse on the bench next to me, and I saw a man walking towards us, and I immediately started tracking his eyes and looking him up and down, and I thought, is this like the Los Angeles rugged style, or is he homeless and going to steal my purse? And I really analyzed. I looked at his shoes, I looked how they were tied, I looked if they were uniform, and I came to the conclusion very quickly that he was going to grab my purse. So I stood up and I looked straight into his eyes. He looked at me really stunned and put his hands back in his pocket and walked away. I might be wrong, but I don't care.
I love that. And you have a cap, I believe, something about stop being so polite. Or what's on your cap?
Oh, I think it says fuck off respectfully.
Yes. Because women
I have a lot of them.
Yeah, I love it. Women especially are they are so polite, and there's the fawn of the fight flies freedom fawn that a lot of people aren't aware of. What I'm getting to there is so many victims, and Tony Blauer actually quotes this, that every victim he's interviewed, they always say, oh, something felt wrong, but I didn't want to. Something didn't quite feel right, but I didn't want to be rude. Does that sound familiar with your dealings with these people as well?
Oh, yes. I think the criminal mind especially looks for a person who isn't going to trust their intuition, who isn't going to listen to the red flags. So you've got, they're they're grooming you, even if it's quickly. They're moving in, they're assessing the safety zone, they're seeing what they can get with the least amount of consequence. And you have a lot of red flags in you. You have your intuition that's coming up all over the place. And every time you shove it down and ignore it, he steps forward. Shove it down and ignore it, he steps forward. And then in his mind, he's closer to you and you're more accessible.
Yeah, I can only, for my crayon brain, it's that red light, orange light, green light, and green, 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 green means go. Go back to your situation the other day with the purse. So we're painting the picture for the listeners. Did that mean that you were paranoid? Did it ruin your day, or was it just another thing that you went, yep, no problem, I've ticked that off, and you avoided a situation easily?
When I grabbed my purse, I saw 3 other women grab theirs.
Beautiful.
And even if we were all wrong, we all kind of looked at each other and said, just in case.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I hope that people can take away from that what you taught there. I've been thinking about this show because we rescheduled a little bit. I was almost titling it in my mind. Normally the title comes from a quote the guest says, but I sort of want to title it "Inside the Mind of a Killer," inside the mind of a sexual predator. I'm not sure if that's going to be too divisive or too confronting, but that's really what we're talking about here. So can you sum up the mind of, we'll do sexual predator first and we'll do killer second, because there's so much United States viewers on the network. What is the mind of a sexual predator like? You touched on it a little bit before. You said there was the immature, the mentally sick people, and you got the fetishists as well, or just the ones that want the orgasm. But what would be inside the mind of a sexual predator? Because the general public out there have got no idea, and you are literally the person to ask.
If I could summarize it, I would say that they don't have boundaries. They don't have boundaries inside. They don't see boundaries outside. Whatever they want, the impulses they have are obtainable, and there's no consequence. And that is how their perception rolls. So if we're talking about pedophilia, the child, the look of the child, the adult, the age is not a boundary. It's an invitation. It's, can I teach this child how to have healthy sex before they actually have a mature relationship? Yeah, I could do that. That's what they think. Also, I'm very connected to the child because I'm emotionally immature, but I have the sex drive of a grown man. So that sex drive is going to be applied to the emotional connection that they feel with the child. So where we control that is, where is the grooming? How has that person accessed the child? Where has this relationship built in the mind of the predator?
Wow.
And then we go over to the more adult aggressors, and they again are looking for the lack of boundaries. They don't have the boundaries in themselves, and they need a higher threshold of stimulation to orgasm, and also just to be excited or happy. There's science behind different parts of their brain being smaller, like the amygdala, but also there's nature and nurture. Some are just born needing a higher level of stimulation for an orgasm, and some are taught over time that they like this, and it builds and builds.
Wow.
But both lack boundaries and respect for them.
Thank you so much for explaining that, and so succinctly as well. And it just, again, reiterates to me, and hopefully for the listeners there, that bad guys don't play by our set of rules. It's so
100%.
important. It's so important for people to comprehend, because if they're coming in at rule Z and you're thinking rule A, you've got a lot of room to make up in that split-second decisions. And that's when we're talking about the time difference between realization and action, which is the freeze response. And that's what, people are trained. We have much, much less time to react. We can react effectively. But gosh, if you think you're playing by, they're going to play by your rules, they sure as hell don't in any way, shape, or form, right?
And it's difficult because you and I have probably been burnt out enough to not take it home every night. You know, we can turn off the vigilance, and we can turn off that stimulation of knowing our perimeter. But other people, they don't turn it off, and they don't want to live at this high level, but they also don't want to be completely ignorant to the difficulties in the world. And it's very difficult for somebody without experience to kind of live in that awareness, but not the fear.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you show so much, is that you don't have the fear, but you got awareness. And I guess that is knowledge dispels fear, right?
Yes. And also, I've seen how it plays out. And I know that if I am hurt, I will be okay. So that also dispels my fear.
That brings me to the other part of this puzzle, that you said you were not only dealing with the perpetrators, but also the victims. Is that to find out what's going on in their head, or is that actually for treatment? What happens there for you?
Well, I work with police and firemen in my private practice because it just fills my heart. And I can hear their stories, and I can walk them through the traumas, and it doesn't ruin me, but it might save them.
Yeah.
And then I testify to the validity or the truthfulness of people's claims that they have been raped. And I do really comprehensive sexual abuse assessments to look at, are you telling the truth? How do we determine if you have trauma from a rape rather than from being in an explosion or a different situation? And I will testify in trial to my belief based on the scientific measures.
Wow, that brings to mind some other cases, and it actually became a crime in New Zealand to falsely accuse someone of rape. It wasn't a crime until I think a man was accused by a 16-year-old of sexual assault, of rape at the time, and it turned out she was lying, and they made it a crime, they made it an offence. But that's, gosh, as a police officer, I'm absolutely agnostic. I just look at the evidence myself, and I would hate for that to be a barrier to anybody that was a true victim. But it's just sad that people would have that malice to say something so detrimental to someone's life that way as well.
Right. I'm hired too by the defense. So I will talk to usually the man. There have been some women and some actual therapists who have been charged with rape. And I'll assess, their personalities and their truthfulness and try and determine if they did it or not.
Yeah.
And paint a picture of their story. And all I can do is provide that to the attorneys, the court, the jury. But I have so much science behind me that's better than just a conversation, right? You have evidence, I have the science. And if we can bring together the most linear data and present that to the court, that's all we can do.
I'm intrigued by something you said, because I've only seen you through Instagram, through your videos, which I think videos are so good because it's very hard to misconstrued. And you said that you've never felt so unsafe as when you're in a women's prison versus a men's. Could you talk us through that? Again, I remember the first time I went into a prison, into a jail, and it was just a different world. Not many people get to experience that world. So what was so scary about a women's prison versus a men's prison?
I felt like the impulsivity was not as readable, and it was much faster. I felt almost like a spookiness, like my startle response was higher.
Yeah.
I could be around male criminals and anticipate the motive. I knew when it was coming, even if it was seconds. With the women, I was startled much more. They were much more violent. They were much more like using their hands and their nails, and the scrappiness was surprising to me.
Wow. So you actually saw that firsthand, or you saw videos of attacks, or what sort of experiences did you go through that you saw that?
Oh, I was doing interviews with a lot of individuals who the judge or the legal team said they weren't competent to move forward with their trial, that there was something with their mental health that was preventing them from understanding what their plea deal was or what they wanted to plea. So I would go into the holding tanks, I would just right into the cells in the Superior Court or in the jailhouses, and I would just start chatting with them, and then just poof, like they would be so quick.
Wow.
With being aggressive towards me.
Wow. Yeah. And I understand what you mean about a man shifting there. I was lucky enough to interview Sean Grogan. He's a veteran police officer, and his skill set is body language. And they give off so many tells, those pre-attack indicators. But women, I never thought about it like that. They're so much more subtle. And now you mention it, Leslie, the female criminals I've seen, as a police officer and also as a civilian, there's a bit, I call them bad guy, but it's a female. You'll see they're so much more subtle. They won't make that overt move. And then if they decide to not go with it, it's actually quite undercover, their moves. Yeah, I know what you mean now.
And I see it a lot in therapy too. I mean, I find that my male clients, it's much easier to see them getting better through their behavioral cues, through the vein on the side of their face, through the way they furrow their brows, from their posture, from their breathing. And women are much better at keeping that more guarded. And I don't know if that's just how we've been brought up in this society in this time, that we have to, if we have big breasts, we don't stand tall because we don't want to put them out there. But the nature almost makes the female more dangerous because you don't see it coming.
Gosh. Yeah, what an eye-opener. And on the other side of that, for a female, I had read a long time ago that females are 10 times better than a man at reading body language, perhaps because of evolution, that they determine from a distance, is this person going to hurt or harm me because they're smaller and weaker. They need to figure it out faster. Would that be something you agree with?
Definitely. I agree with that personally. And then I agree with that with my clients. And clients that go to the gym, the women know exactly what guys look at them every time. They know what cars those guys drive. They know when they come in and out of the gym. The guys have no clue who's in there with them.
What a great example, especially for Crayon Me over here. You did mention about 10 minutes ago, being able to switch off as well. We've got those different levels. We've got condition white, condition yellow, condition orange and red. And I've forgotten the name of the thing. I don't really need to know it, but where you are. But how did you come through this whole career unscathed?
I am scathed. I am definitely scathed, but what I've chosen is to use that as an empowerment tool. Yeah. Because I've been assaulted, I've been attacked. I'll be in a grocery store and someone drops something and I reach for my alarm on my hip, but it's not there because I'm not in a prison. So I still have that vigilance, but over time, I go to therapy. I really like EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization. I feel like that brings down I can think of startling memories, but it brings down the emotions that are associated with it.
Yep.
Talk therapy, I think, has been really helpful. And then again, just understanding what went through the minds of these people. How did the crime occur? Because nobody thinks they're going to be a victim, but can we have a full understanding of the picture in order to really know how it played out and what the roles were and empower us with knowledge?
Thank you for being so open about that. You said something, there was a lot to unpack for a start, but I'll try and unpack a little bit. The first thing that came to mind there was no one expects to be a victim. I say so often that you should just freeze. That's normal human response. I wrote an article for a magazine on the playground stabbing in France almost a year ago. Horrible time. And then there was one about there was an active shooter in New Zealand just about 6 months ago. And I said, those grandparents in France in the playground, they should have frozen when they saw some crazy guy with a knife. That's not been seen before. But now that you've read my article, or now you've seen it on the news, now in the playground, whereas before you're like, is my kid playing okay? And is that kid being mean to mine? Now you're looking for the real weird guy with a knife. Hopefully never happen. But it's important to bring that up. Very normal response to have that, Leslie. What I meant with the unscathed, what you come through with was listen to those people's, no, sorry, I'll go back a stage, or that's another part. Talking through those experiences helps us so much. You spoke about talk therapy and EMDR, really talking through it. When you said takes emotion away from it, that's all we're really trying to do. We're just trying to process it. So just so the listeners can get an idea, and I'm obviously not a psychologist, when you have a traumatic event happen, and traumatic could be somebody shouting at you, or it could be someone stabbing you. It's anybody's range, right? Is what you're trying to say is process it from that traumatic event into a normal memory file? Is that what you're saying there?
Yes. So when the traumatic event occurs, we have very strong emotions that link up with the traumatic event. We've got the fight or flight. We've got, all of the hormones, whatever our body decides to do, but it's not healthy, right? It's not an everyday place to live.
Yeah.
So what if we can retell that story? We can rewrite the narrative of what happened with calm emotions. Can we start to override the emotions that originally attached to the story with calm emotions? And then we need to practice that. And then can we start to shelve, like you were saying, the story until we want to access it rather than it intruding on us, which is a symptom of PTSD.
And comes back to that person on the counter the other day. I'm sure, no, it's an assumption, sorry, that you've just rationalized that, talked it through with people perhaps afterwards, but you didn't overwhelm that memory, that event, with all those emotions and have an overreaction to it, but it was just in a healthy way. There would just be one of those memories and things that occurred, and it's another file in your brain to access and maybe tell the story to someone else.
And exactly. I mean, that is how I would define intuition. Is our intuition is all of those stories without words inside of us. And we get this feeling and we think, okay, wait, there aren't words, so I'm going to just shove the feeling away. But our intuition is our body telling us the story of the trauma, of the world we've lived in, of our lives. And we need to listen regardless of the language.
That's interesting, because yeah, sometimes when you get the words out to another human, it actually starts to make sense, or be silly, one or the other, and you start to make sense of it in some way. But when it's in your head, it's kind of stuck, isn't it? And as you said, it's language in your head that you may not understand.
Right. I almost see it as like maybe like a crane. The words are like your crane, where you're going in and you're grabbing your emotions and you're pulling them out with the story. And what did Freud called it, like chimney sweeping, or a cathartic method. But it is really true. If it's in you, it's jumbled. It's jumbled with words and emotions and history. And we need to bring it out in the presence of another person, or in the presence of a journal, videotaping ourselves, but get it out there and connect it back with reality.
That's interesting, intriguing. Now, men's and women's brains. There's a very famous show, clip on YouTube, and it's actually from a longer 1.5 hour presentation of the difference between men's brains and women's brains, actually by a psychologist who's also a preacher, I believe, a clever psychologist. He talked about men's brains and women's brains. I don't know if you've seen this clip at all.
I don't know.
So it's hilarious. He's got a great sense of humor, which is brilliant. Men's brains, we've got a bunch of boxes that we pull that box out, open that box and put it back and make sure it doesn't touch any other box, and it's just that box. And then women's brains, everything's connected. This box connects to this, and this. Is that a bit different as well? I mean, you're talking generically psychology around traumatic memories and trying to put them into perspective. Is it a bit different with females versus males, or is it the same?
I think it is very different, and it depends on the person. So I have some female firefighters, and they chose to get into fire, and they can compartmentalize really well.
Yeah.
But I'll have the wife of a fireman who can't compartmentalize his stories and his life and his traumas.
Yeah.
And so understanding how everybody functions, but largely the women are so interconnected, the anxiety is at a higher level, but also they have this larger capacity, this grander capability to see the big picture and heal the trauma faster.
Wow.
So and then with men, I do see, and of course we've got everyone in between, but with men, I do see it's difficult in shift work, because shift work almost reinforces the way that a male brain works. So then everything kind of moves even slower.
Right. Yeah, the crayon eaters over here. That's intriguing. That I'll just tie off the psychology side in a bow. Jordan Peterson's fairly famous for a quote saying about the way men process problems and the way women process problems. I think he said female actually. And men, when we talk, we'll go action. Here's a problem. Okay, well, you should do this. Done. And when females talk, it's all the talk, every nuance of the problem, every little bit, and then no action. And he stated that neither are complete solutions to a problem. Maybe you should have, hey, really look at all the nuances and maybe have some action. And guys, before you do the action advice, let's talk about it a bit. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, I would agree. And I think I have to know where I'm at when I am around people in therapy, because I need to make sure I'm not projecting the way that I think. Because I'm much more like a guy in a lot of ways, but then I'm a woman in other ways. And so I have to keep my own awareness when I'm trying to help someone with their trauma, and I'm trying to really understand where they're coming from. But I don't know if I need to find it. There's an article that talks about how women need overactive, really bad TV at nighttime, like Bravo, The Housewives,
Yeah.
Housewives of Beverly Hills. And that almost erratic nature calms their overactive brain. When men tend to need something a little more like mountain men, or Pawn Stars, something a little more calm, and that brings their brain up to a steady state where they can then feel rest.
I agree.
It's very interesting.
I agree. If I'm watching over in New Zealand, Australia, there's something like Married at First Sight, or what I call it junk TV, and I can't handle the thing. It's noise to me. It's making my brain hurt. But if I put something else on, it'll be the same. So I can say from my experience, I agree.
Yes, my husband says that my TV shows make him really, really angry, and he's a psychologist.
Well, that thing brings us back to, and that was a great segue when you're saying you must be aware of your own brain space, your own thoughts. What got you into psychology in the first place, and yeah, what's been your driver for that?
I'd love to give you an answer that is very heroic, but honestly, it started because everybody told me I couldn't do it, and I was so fucking defiant.
I love that. I love that.
And I said, okay, what is the hardest place I could work at for my first psychology rotation, and what is the biggest challenge I could have? And it was the Los Angeles County Jail.
Wow.
A massive jail known all over the world to be incredibly dangerous. And I found a psychologist there, and I said, you need to start a training program, and I'll be your first trainee. And
Wow.
there was a lot of pushback, but eventually I got in the door with 3 other psychologists who I still talk to, and we were terrified, but we did it. And it was fascinating to see the unmedicated, recently arrested, completely mentally ill criminals that were coming through the doors. And that's when I started to actually build a passion and appreciation for the capacity of the mind.
As I was talking with Matt Thomas, Pinell County Sheriff or Deputy Sheriff last week, like I said, and their process, he was 19 years old when he applied to become a sheriff or whatever they do in there. But the first 2 years is working in the jail. And I said to him, that's brilliant, because in a pretty controlled environment, you're not out there in the wild on the street, you get to talk to bad guys and you get to get your fear out and you get to figure out their games, and then down the track you're streetwise. So what you went to the hardest part, and then I guess it's been sort of easier to figure things out from there.
It was very difficult because it was chaos.
Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of, you know, new officers and you've got a bunch of young staff, and we're all trying to figure it out amongst the highest level ranking gang members in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Who's gonna win?
They'll play you pretty hard, Leslie.
I mean, riots started. I mean, there was a time when I handed out gum and I didn't know you couldn't have gum in jails. I mean, I was manipulated so much, but I learned so much too.
You've written a book as well. Could you tell us about that, please?
I started thinking about this book during COVID because what I found was that people were happier when they had this external boundary of not needing to be around crappy, toxic people.
Right.
And I couldn't believe that some of my clients in the midst of a pandemic were happier. And then as the pandemic lifted, they became less happy because they started to be around people they didn't like.
Right.
And so the book is about, hey, why do we need an external boundary, an external permission to set that boundary? Why can't we just do it ourselves?
Yep.
Why can't we just step back and say, look at all the people in my life, look at the amount of energy I have to give to family, to work, to friends, whatever it may be. Why can't I just get rid of the shitty people? And why can't I be more strategic about my interactions and my energy and how I go about my social life?
That's brilliant. What's the title of the book? And people will have this in the show notes before the show that's recorded. So what's the title of the book, Leslie?
It's called The Friend Cleanse.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Brilliant title.
It's on Amazon right now. And on my website, I have this interactive game, a free game I had made where you can practice naming your friends and placing them on this sphere around you. And you can visualize your energy. There's a little cup of energy going up or down. So you can actually actively think, okay, what does my week look like? Is Sally going to be here? Is Betty going to be here? Okay, I have a 2-year-old. He's always going to be draining this year. So I can't have too many people in my inner circle that are going to be draining too. So my little 2-year-old gets a little picture inside.
I love that. Yeah, I was just saying this morning, I believe, it's only my belief, that being a good parent makes you a better human. And one of the reasons I say that is when ours was 2 and 3, anything he said, he would have learned from the 2 people. He didn't learn from anybody else, didn't learn from TV. So if he's saying something like a swear word or doing something crazy, you showed him that. You showed him that. So it's on you to be a good role model, because they model behavior well before they learn words.
I always ask my daughter what she's the most proud of in herself. Right now she's 7, and lately she's saying, I'm the most proud that I can stand up for myself.
Gosh, what a great thing to instill in a female child. That's amazing, Leslie. It made me think about the parents of females, parents of girls that keep saying they're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're so beautiful. Because I've interviewed, I think I might have interviewed a model or something like on this. There's always going to be someone prettier. But if you're clever, I always say to my boy, be clever. I never say be careful. You know, that's something you can work on. But if their value, their worth is just based on how pretty you are or something, that's I think that's very very restrictive. But what a great thing you've clearly shown her to stand up for herself. How did you do that? Was that just through your talk or your actions? How did you come up with that?
I mean, I've always talked to her like an adult since she was a baby, but we practice. Like if she wants something from her dad and he's saying no because he's a harder parent than I am, we practice our bartering, and I feed her lines to kind of manipulate him into getting what she wants. And so we practice social situations, and she models me walking up to strangers and then talking to them and discussing why I chose that person, why I chose them, why they were safe. So everything in life becomes a lesson and a conversation with us. And she has become more verbal, but she was also very verbal to start with. So it's been an easy flow.
Yeah.
And she's proud of me, and that makes her proud of herself.
You got to remember, not you, it's preaching to the choir with you, but listeners, we're raising, for mine, it's raising men. I'm raising a boy, I'm raising a man. And I had a former Navy SEAL, Eric Davis, on. He's written a book called Raising Men. And exactly that, we're raising them to be grown-ups. We don't have to restrict their playtime and things. They're totally fine to do their things, but raising them to grow into adults and good adults. So I love that you're parenting like that, and really cool for listeners to hear as well. That may bring us to one of the last couple of questions. Long career in psychology and such realms. What's your purpose now?
Empowerment and knowledge. I had no idea that people would like my Instagram, but I had this feeling inside of me that I could not hold these stories in anymore.
Yeah.
And that there was something in me, just like how I can talk to a jury and explain something very difficult to understand to 12 people I've never met. Mm-hmm. I wanted to use social media as a platform to start explaining the real world that we warehouse. At least in America, we warehouse these individuals, and we don't talk about the reality of the danger. And how can I bring that information to you in a way that you can hear it, digest it, and not be haunted by it? And in doing so, I want to empower you and build your knowledge so that people can be happy and strong. So whatever platform I can find to do that, I plan to do it.
Great. You're so clear on it. You've got such interesting crossovers with the Special Forces community. I interviewed Dan Cooper, Australian SAS here, and he's the same thing. He said in his 40s, now we're just giving away knowledge, like we're sharing it, but in our 30s, in our immature phases, in 30, I'm thinking I was a kid, you wouldn't tell someone the secret way you pulled the trigger, so you would be better. And you're holding all the information close, but now all we're doing is serving others. I interviewed the Sergeant Major of the New Zealand Army, so that's the highest ranking soldier for the listeners. But he was my assault sergeant in the unit, so I knew him as first name basis and nickname basis. I asked him what the Sergeant Major Army does, and he said he's there to serve others. And this service of others is, I'm just honored to be able to share your story with others, and as you say, empowering people with knowledge. It's brilliant. You do it in a great way, especially on the socials and the videos. It gets it across so well. But you're very clear on your purpose there, and I do wish you all the best. I'm going to grab the book too, The Friend Cleanser. I like the idea of that. It's a nice little snapshot of where you are.
Yes. Yeah. I think, having been manipulated by so many psychopathic people in my past, I've learned to set some pretty strong boundaries. And if I can teach through that book how to set boundaries strategically for other people to save their lives, it's worth the read. It was worth the hassle.
Exactly. And it's not just psychology, or, I talked to this serial killer or serial rapist, and maybe somebody else is hearing your story. In the fire brigade, we talk about jobs to each other, because if a guy in another shift has been to a job I've never been to, and maybe I never go to for 10 years, but if I remember something about that thing he said, it might save my life. It's just finding those things away and going, yep, I'll just hold that onto that for a rainy day. And, something as easy as locking your door, something as easy as watching someone's eyes, looking at your handbag, may stop that trauma that hassle you've had in your life. And they're brilliant tips. I really want to say thank you for what you do there.
And I just want to add one thing, because I think a lot of your listeners would appreciate this, that as first responders, we can make fun, we can joke about the violence, but I encourage people before they do that to just take a moment to mourn the severity of what they just encountered. And so many individuals I work with, they go from scene to scene, from violence to violence, and then they sleep or they laugh or they joke around, and they never take that minute to say, that was a human life. Let's really take this seriously for a minute. And I think with fire, police, with military, it's so important for us to humanize, and then we can make fun of it after.
Well, that's important that you said that, because that's literally what the bad guys do. They dehumanize others. And in the military side of things, we have to dehumanize a person, because another person who's not mentally ill shouldn't be able to inflict serious harm or death to another person. In the self-defense realm, I have to teach people to do that, because I'm talking about a bad situation. But I've never heard that, Leslie. You've done it in such a clever way there. Why not humanize that person to get that connection? And I specifically remember the last person I cut out of a car. He was likely the offender in a car crash, and the person that crashed into him was dead. And we were humanizing him afterwards. You're like, oh, I feel so sorry for that guy. He's only 17. He's probably going to go to jail. He's probably this on his conscience. But we were humanizing him afterwards. So we naturally did that. There was a bit of dark humor there too. Actually turned out to be pretty good. That the other guy was actually the bad guy. The other guy was speeding on drugs. But we naturally did that. So that's a clever thing for those people out there in the EMS world to think about. Take that pause, file it away, and then leave that memory there, rather than have a traumatic event and a dehumanized thing that's going to make you numb to everything else.
Right. So it's how not to die inside over time too.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Oh gosh, what an interesting conversation. I'm going to ask you one last question to tie up, and it's my 2024 question. The context of this question is none of us would be here at this time and date and year if we hadn't gone through what we had. But if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Trust the experiences of the wise people in your life.
Wow. That's clever. I've been waiting for the wisdom. I personally think I'm 50 years old, waiting for the wisdom to come, and all I've got is a bunch of memories from very smart people that I know. So I'm calling that my wisdom. But gosh, those people that have been through experiences that you haven't, that's so much to learn from, isn't it?
It's incredible. And to see how they've lived their lives and found happiness at the end of their lives. And yet at 25, I was thinking I could tell them something new. I could tell them something that was going to influence them. Now that I'm 40, I'm only 41, but I look back at my 25-year-old self and I think, oh my God, you were such an asshole.
Oh.
And I'm sure I'll say that about myself when I'm 60, but
the humility and openness to learning that every guest on this show is shown is brilliant. And I think it's one of the things that people love about this show, that they learn. If and I say at the end of the show, if there's one thing one person's learned from this show that's helped them, that we've done our job. But yeah, it's that 25-year-old self, we have a tenant. We have 4 tenants in the New Zealand SAS, and one of them is we brook no sense of class. And I never forget, because you said you're a 25-year-old arsehole, paraphrased. Well, we sent a 23-year-old kid. He was in our unit. He was in the counter-terrorist team. We sent him away to Las Vegas for explosives breaching course. And in fact, I just interviewed the instructor on that. What's that? Maybe almost 20 years later. He was a 23-year-old guy. He came back with 2 weeks of knowledge from the best breaching course in the world. We were on the table in the squadron hangar, surrounded by all the operators, and there was a sergeant major there. This guy's a private, and there's a sergeant major, which is about 7 ranks higher, 20 years experience as an experienced shooter. And that sergeant major was learning from this kid because he was humble enough to learn, but the kid wasn't putting it across an arrogant way. He was just going, this is the things they showed us. Here we go. And it was that knowledge transfer that was such a great aspect of the team, sharing knowledge up and down and not going, well, you're 23, I'm 45, I didn't need to listen to you. It was open and honest communication and what can we figure out from learning from each other. So I think you may be a bit hard on yourself, that you think you could influence others, because you probably could have. You're very clever, but great wise words to say, to listen to other people with experience.
And probably cultural too. I mean, growing up in California, who knows? California is another world.
I've heard this. It's funny that, California back in my day was Schwarzenegger and Venice Beach, and now it's who's your crazy governor eating at restaurants while everybody's locked down at COVID, and then defund the police. So the ideas you get through the media about the place are probably very, very wrong.
No, that's pretty on point.
Hey, you're straight up.
Our news is wrong about every other country, but your news is probably more accurate about us.
Hey, look, I'm excited to read your book. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I really wanted to get insight into you and what you show on the socials, and just really great the way you put that message across with a smile, and your communication method is clear. So, again, thank you for defining your purpose in there and for what you do. And thank you for coming on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. At the start of the show, like I said, the show notes are there, but at this stage, again, we'll just reiterate it. Where's the best place to go for people to find out more about you?
My website is drlesliedobson.com, and then Instagram is Dr. Leslie Dobson. TikTok keeps getting banned. I'm not really sure why, so that's not really growing. And then there's a YouTube. It's dr.leslie_.
Cool. All the links are in the show notes, as well as narrated at the start. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Leslie. Been beautiful talking to you, and I'll hit pause and we'll have a chat. Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.